Now, the next topic, and some of this we'll just kind of talk about just very briefly since this is our last class. Um, there is an advanced Java class. I don't know when that's scheduled. It's not scheduled for the spring, but in that class, we actually go into detail on all this. There's an array list, and this first paragraph here really summarizes when would you use it. Array has one glaring shortcoming. You have to know how many elements will be in the array when you create it. And then you're stuck with that choice. Just like a string builder, array list can change size at runtime as needed. Like an array list is an order sequence, allows duplicates. So instead of hard-coding numbers there, then this allows you to dynamically change it. Now, we saw where we could pass in an array and the size of the array into like a method and get around that, but it's still the same idea as where you're setting up the size, and it doesn't dynamically grow. Here's how you set up an array list. You see it's got the new construct. So you have your array list, the name of it equals new array list, and then the size, if there is one, or you can leave blank. And the final example tells Java we want to make a copy of another array list. So list 2 is the one right above it. Now this is more of the format that you may see in some other classes, where you do your array list, then you got less than, and then the data type, then the greater than. And besides that, it's kind of the same principle. And this is done via generics, which allow you to specify the type of the class that the array list will contain. In Unity, when we're using that package, we use this all the time. Now there is an add method that inserts a new value in the array list. You see here after we defined the array list, then you do a list.add and then a name. So that'll add that in there. So very easy way to add something in. You don't have to know where the last empty cell is and so forth. It handles it automatically for you. This just indicates you can add different items besides like a string. If you actually specify the data type, like if you say it's a string, then if you try to add something that's not a string, it won't work. Like down here, we got a string, and we add Hawk, so Hawk is right there, and then we add a Robin. This refers to our index position, and Robin appears second because this is 0th position. The Hawk is 0, and then Robin's 1. If we then add one at 0, the Blue Jay, it'll shift everything over. So it puts this in the 0th position, and then the Hawk goes the 1st position, Robin goes the 2nd position. Here we're telling to put the cardinal at the 1st position. Well, this is position 0, so it leaves it alone, and it takes the Hawk and shifts it over and puts the cardinal at index 1, position 1. And this would, the Hawk would be position 2, and then Robin would be 3. Now you can remove. And here we add hawk again. Um, when you do a birds dot remove cardinal, that returns true or false. And you can see that here. The Boolean right here tells what's being returned. And so it returns true or false whether it worked or not. And since there is no cardinal in the list, that's why it prints false. Because this entire part right here returns false. Where this entire part right here, during birds.remove hawk, since hawk is in the list, it's successful, so it returns true. The what? Um, if I had to guess, and I don't know, I haven't read anything about the memory, but I would guess that the arrays is probably more efficient. Array list probably has more overhead because it doesn't know how big the array could be. So it has to juggle that in memory for you. So whenever you do an add, if it exceeds where it originally put it in memory, then it has to move that to a different spot or have a pointer so part of it would go. So that's just my general guess on it. When you say your array is 5 elements period and it can't grow, then you can put it into a certain memory spot and it will always be there. So I don't know what line 8's doing. It says line 8 removes the element at index 0, which is the last remaining element in the array list. Hmm. Oh, I see. If you do the remove and the object name, it returns Boolean. If you do the remove and you pass in the index, then this E right here, the E return type is the element that actually got removed. Okay, so that makes sense then. So when it did the remove 0, it didn't return true or false. It returned the actual name. It's interesting design. Set method changes one of the elements. And again, once you start understanding how to read these, then it makes more sense. Like the E, that tells you it's going to return the element that got replaced. Int index, that's a position. Okay, and E is our new element. What we're going to put in its place. That's curious. That's the only signature it has. Okay, so we add hawk. Size is 1. 0 robin. So it changes at position 0, which is the hawk, changes it to robin. It's a size birds.set1 robin. It says index out of bounds exception because you can only do a dot set if there's an entry there. And since we never did another add, the only position we have is position 0. That's curious that there's no provision about, instead of the index, um, having the actual element you're looking for. Like you could put Hawk here or inside of quotes, and then replace it with Robin. But that's the way they designed set. Now notice that this birds.set right here is just birds.set. It's not. It appears like it's not returning anything based upon that. But up here we said that it's going to return something. We saw this last time or time before, where when it returns a value, returns something, you don't always have to do anything with that. So you can just ignore that. You could equally have set this equal to another variable when it did this birds.set. Is empty. Probably checks to see if there's nothing in it. Yeah, is empty. Size is how many entries are in there. Clear is a way to discard all elements of the array list. Now, see, I wonder on this if I had one of them still here. Let's see, add frame. Yeah, here's one. Well, I was looking to see if there it is. Default list model mod equals new default list model. And nowhere it does here to specify the size of it, so it can keep growing. So you see the same principle in a lot of different elements, because you don't know how many numbers you're going to be putting in here. If you got some of these other components, you don't necessarily know how many you're going to be putting in there. Like there's a tree. There it is. There's a tree right here. That's you think of like a tree. That's not of course a tree, you might think, but it's like branches off, like directories. And how many directories can you have? Well, 50, 100, 10,000. I don't, we don't know. So that's where you have a lot of the dynamic items in here. This list is dynamic. Table, I never have done a dynamic. So I'm not sure about that. I would guess you could make it dynamic, like Excel. You can keep on going down type of deal. There is a limit to Excel. Say 100,000. That's curious. Well, it may go down any further than that, but here I can. Keep doing the page down. This is the idea of dynamic components. How far can I go down? I don't know. I don't know if it's keeping memory for all those cells in between. Could be. But a lot of things in programming are dynamic. Let's see what else is there. Some of these dialog boxes have dynamic items to them. Since you don't know how many files will be listed, then there's dynamic component to this, but there's only like a discrete amount right here. Scroll pane, I don't think is dynamic, but anyway, you get the idea. So it looks like contains returns a true or false, whether you found it or not, and what you're searching for. Looks like you need a special equals to compare it to the lists. So if you have two array lists, checking if one is equal to the other one. This returns true because they're both empty. And if I add an A to one of them, add an A to the other one, and then check to see if they're still equal, it says they are. But if you add a B to one of them and then the other one, you add a B at the 0th position, the very first position, then they won't be equal to each other. So again, they provide more methods, more functionality for your arrays, where it makes your life easier. Talk about wrapper classes. Up to now, we put string objects in array lists. What happens if we want to put primitives in, like integer and so forth? Each primitive type has a wrapper class, which is an object type that corresponds to the primitive. Table 3.2 lists all the wrapper classes along with the constructor for each. Now you see this in different programming languages. Like our primitive type int, there's a wrapper class of integer. I don't know if this will come up or not. I was getting some kind of error message yesterday on it. Doesn't have my trial version that expired, but I'm using the free version. That's not, didn't come up this time. Okay. Let's see. Create new project. Just form. Next. I know you can see this when you're going to C# via from Unity, but I'm hoping you can see it from the regular C# also. Okay. Okay, so we got a variable called test. It's an integer, and test is equal to integer. Maybe it's int 32, 32, or 64. I don't know what ones there are. And then parse. Converts a string. Try parse. I can never remember which one. Converts a string representation to its 64-bit return value. An overload takes one argument. That's interesting. Let's see. $19.32. Dot try parse string s out is integer result. No overload for method takes try parse takes one argument. I did have one argument in there. The out. Okay. Show potential fixes. Fix. Obviously, I don't know the correct syntax for that. Out. Result. Sounded like something. Cannot complicitly Boolean to integer. Simplified name int32. Huh. Now, I don't. That's weird. I've changed things from string, and of course, I didn't do it here. I thought for sure it was integer. Well, anyway, the idea is you have that wrapper class. Not that I know how to use it, but that's what that int32 is. Gives you a lot more functions you can use. I'm thinking Java. Java is the integer dot parse int. But again, it allows you to convert like a string to an integer. Doesn't necessarily have the best error checking. Like if you pass in an A, it throws number format exception. The integer dot value of, what is value of? Changes a float to a integer? I don't think I use that. We did the string dot value of. Returns a wrapper class. These remember. Okay, what's value of does? Okay, the value of, I guess, is what returns it as a wrapper. The integer parse is what returns as an integer. Okay, so accomplishing the same task, except for one of them putting in an integer and one of them putting them into the wrapper. Why won't you need to be concerned whether a primitive wrapper class returned? Yeah, since Java 5, you can just type the primitive value and Java will convert to the relevant wrapper class for you. This is called autoboxing. So we got a list, a double. We add 50.5. Then we add a new double 60. Remove 50.5, and then weights.get. Get gets the value at that. So line 5, autoboxes a double primitive into a double object and adds that to the list. Line 6 shows that you can still write code a long way and pass in a wrapper object. This right here is just a double. And so it's changing it to the wrapper is what they're saying. Or if you do the new, that they say is a long way to do that. So you don't have to worry about it. It does that, handles it automatically for you. This shows you how to change an array list into an array. Okay, so we got two elements in our array. And then we do a list.toArray. And that converts it from our array list to just a regular array. And assigns it to this object array. There's two entries there. And what's line 8 doing? New string 0. Oh, that isn't referring to an array at all. Okay. Where's that? Line 6 shows an array list, shows how to convert to array. The only problem is that it defaults to an array of class object. You see that in a lot of different programming languages where something's an object. just not Java, but like a list box here. Let's try it again. Dot add. Okay, before I type it in there, you see what I'm adding just says object. Doesn't say string, doesn't say whatever. There I'm adding an integer. Then you see it adds those two. So it's just not Java that refers to something just as an object. Object is kind of a generic thing saying it could be anything. It could be a string, could be an integer, could actually be a class of some sort you're developing. Okay, line 8 specifies the type of the array and does what we actually want. The advantage of specifying a size of 0 for the parameter is Java will create a new array of proper size for the return value. Okay. So it looks like the only difference there is you have to put in this new string 0 here. Other than that, it's still just list.to array. I'm assuming if it's an integer, like if this was an integer here, you would want to put an integer here also. Converting from array to a list is more interesting. The original array and created array back to list are linked. When change is made to one, it's available in the other. See, I don't think that was how the NetBeans worked with the our list here, if I remember right. Because we got our we took our model and we added an element to it. I guess that was the way it worked, wasn't it? Because after I like this right here was actually our list box, and we connected it to this model. And then when I added an element to the model, it automatically added it to the list box. So oftentimes you see some of these same principles works in different areas. Because you're wondering, well, how does that compare? Well, these right here, one of them is like an array list. You think of a list of elements, and which would correspond with what we have here. And the others are maybe, I don't know if it's an array of string or not. Not sure about how that works, but it's the same principle though. Does that make sense on what this would do? Okay. Sorting. Got our array list of integers. We had these three. We do a collections dot sort, and then we pass in numbers. and then that will sort them. These are just some different items: local time, local date time, local date that you can refer to. Now refers to what's happening right now. So, like the time right now is 10:07. The date is 12/5/2019. So depending upon what you're asking for, the putting the dot now on there will have it access those. Now you can create a local date that's not based upon now, but where you pass in the values. So this would set the month to January 20th, 2015. Now this month dot on January dot here, this is a user friendly way of doing it. So you can do month dot February, month dot March, so forth. Maybe it makes it a little bit more readable instead of putting a one in here. Then somebody doesn't wonder what does that one represent. Although if you're doing a date, it seems like how can you get that confused? Well, if you have a one here, I wish I'd quit popping up. I wish I could highlight this without it popping up. But then you put a one right here, which one's a month, which one's a day. It's not terribly hard in programs that have you pass that in. You just try it and see. Sometimes you just put like 20 in one of them, and then it'll give you an error if that's supposed to be the month. It says, though it's good to use the month constants to make code easier to read, you can pass the INT number of the month directly. And here's how you're supposed to refer to them. The of, based upon local date. That's what this dot of is referring to right here. You pass in the year, the month, day of month, all those is integers. Or you can do int, and you see this is a month. This is enumeration. You see how it says it's a special type of class called an enum. I don't know if we can get it to pop up over here or not. Let's see. Might have to import something. That pops up with those. Um, I'm trying to think of something else that's enumeration. Color? Color oftentimes is enumeration in many programming languages. See, like green here. It says color green and default sRGB space. So instead of you trying to remember some obscure value, then you can use those. List of enumerations in Java. you can define your own. So you don't have to even go with what they come up with. So I guess instead of trying to remember that, let's try to create one. I don't remember where you have to have it at. I've never really wrote a program to use these. I know you can do it, but enum car Ford Honda. And obviously don't have it in the right place. I wonder where you do put enumerations. Of course, I'm looking at code that isn't working. That's always the best thing to copy off of. Public. Let's copy this one. Oops. Pizza status. I bet it has to be within the class. Yeah, no little red squigglies. And then wherever you're referring to it, you can do a dot, and you can see delivered, ordered, ready there. So you can have that pop up. Anyway, that's how you do enumerations. Like I say, I've never used them in however many years of programming. To me, I think they make it a little bit confusing. Seems like we'll have to make it more easy to read. But if I said if pizza status dot ordered equals, I don't even know if you can check it like that. Probably need to check a variable against it. Bad operating types. First type integer, second type is pizza status. I'm not even sure how to do that. I say I don't use those. But you run across that in your program, and the month is pretty obvious. You can look at it and see month.January. That's fairly obvious. But then other ones may not be so obvious. Like, well, what is month? We know month is enumeration because that's always defined in Java or a lot of programming languages. But what's pizza status? Besides an enumeration, what could this also represent? It could represent an instance, and this could represent the variables that go with the class variables. And so that's why I don't really like them, because you really have to then go search and see, well, what does that mean, and so forth. But some people use them. Um, Knowing dates is important in some respects. Trying to remember if Java has it or not. Some programming languages have a calendar component, and it returns a date. I'm not seeing a, I'm not really seeing a calendar. There's a way to put those in alphabetical order. No, I don't see it. I don't see a date there. See, here is in I can make that bigger. Here's a date time picker, and there's even, I think, a calendar somewhere. Maybe not. Calendar. No. But if I run that, if you query against it, this is just generally in programming, not in Java. If you choose this drop down, it pops up with this calendar. These calendars are popular in a lot of different development packages, and so when you choose this and you were to programmatically access this, you'd have to access it as a date. I'm really surprised the NetBeans doesn't have that. People love those calendars because it's so easy to work with dates in that manner. Because you can't put in an invalid date when you brings up a calendar, and you force them to use that calendar. This talks about how Java 8 and later, the new way of working with importing dates in. Import java.time.asterisk to create an object for date. Date D equals new date. Now you use local date. D equals local date dot now. I really don't remember that given the current date, but their implication is it does. Create an object with the current date and time. Use new date. The dot now again. And here's, I guess, a calendar, which is a lot more than just the date, and has a lot of different features goes along with it, time and so forth. Sometimes it's hard to work with dates, and so having the functionality included in here, where you plus days 2, where you're adding 2 days onto it, plus weeks 1, where you add 1 week onto it, is invaluable. I had somebody from the prison here, not prison, correctional facility in this area, that she came to one of my Excel workshops, and she needed to know some time between 2 dates. She even had time, besides just the dates, she had hours between them. And they needed to be notified with the function when so much time had passed. See, that gives you 7. But if you were to change these and include a time in, then you have other issues. We wrote the function for her in the class. I don't even remember how I wrote the function. It wasn't trivial. It wasn't like just subtract them like that. Formulas. There's a whole slew of items you can choose here for dates. So again, they're including all that in Java, try to make your life a little bit easier. So if you do get something bizarre, like they got to know exactly when 7 days and 12 hours have passed, then you can use some of these functions. When you say plus days, that's assumption is that the time remains the same if it was a calendar. Local date doesn't have a time, but plus months, plus years. I don't even know if they approach that on the calendar. Backwards in time, minus. Skipping over some of this because I wanted to be done with material at 10:30 and open up for any questions you have for next semester or subtracting a day, working with periods. Okay, that's just an example. I never have understood this one. Somebody looked it up one semester, but I forgot what it meant. Local date and local date time have a method to convert them into long equivalents in relation to 1970. What's special about 1970? That's what Unix started using for date standards. So Java reused it. That's what Unix started using for date standards. I still don't know any more than I did before. Maybe they just had to pick some date, so they chose that. Well, how does it do it? 1/2/2019 to 2/1 2019. Well, it converts these to the number seconds. Assuming seconds. But based upon that starting time frame, changes this number of seconds, changes this number of seconds, and then you can subtract it very easily. And then you convert it to whatever you're working with. Does that make sense? Yeah. From a human standpoint, we just sit there with a calendar and we count the number of days. You can't actually subtract them. If I did 315, you can't take 3 minus 1 is 2, 15 minus 2 is 13. I got 2 months and 13 days. And it just doesn't work out very well. So it's usually represented with a number. Sometimes it doesn't even put it into a date format, it gives you the number. And you're sitting there wondering, what in the world is that that's giving me? But again, I never remember this date, but it's number of seconds is January 1st, 1970. So I wonder, this is a date. See, I don't think Excel's doing the same thing. I don't think that's number of seconds since 1970. It seems pretty small. Number of days since 1970? January 1st, 1970 to 1/2/2019 equals this minus this. I have no clue what that is. But again, it represents dates different ways, I guess. So doesn't appear to be doing the same thing. This talks about how you can format them, get month, get year, get day of year. A lot of them have that. Sometimes you work with this in programming, sometimes not. All depends on what you're doing exactly. Sometimes you use this for log files. Like your goal is you want to create a log file that has the log and then your month, your day, and then your year. So you want to build that, like we looked at how to write a file out. So you want to build this name. So you have to get the month, day, and year, concatenate those together with log and .txt, and make sure that these are all the same size. So that 1205 would be the same size as 1221, 2019. Just so it sorts correctly when you do a directory. Far am I from the end? I guess that's the end. Didn't get to some of the methods, encapsulation, class design. We did cover those in the first book. Exceptions we covered just slightly. So if you get a chance, I would read through exceptions. There's lots you can do with exceptions. And the lots I say that you can do with it, there's a lot more than just creating a simple um, try scenario. You can define your own exceptions, and you can define your own error handling. It's quite powerful what you can do with those. Okay, I wanted to briefly go over the classes. Um, the introduction to computer science that introduces you to various programming concepts, along with some definitions and history and so forth. Um, you learn HTML, HTML5, a little bit of CSS, and JavaScript. HTML is the markup language for designing web pages. CSS is the style, so getting a web page to look a certain way. JavaScript is where you add some kind of interactivity into a web page, although JavaScript is being used in many places. It's used in server side in some manner. Couldn't tell you how. I haven't went and researched that yet. The Android app development 2, that's more if you're took Android app development 1, and that's a continuation of those principles and so forth. And you design an app for a cell phone, so for an Android. Seems like everything's going either to your cell phone or to some kind of tablet. And so whether you're designing for a phone or a tablet, same principle on that. CompTIA A plus let's cut some of that off, but the practical applications, I believe is the full name. That's a continuation of the first A plus class, and that's if you wanted to work on machines. So probably if you go into computer science, it'll help you, give you some very basics of the design and so forth. But in a day-to-day capacity, you don't do a whole lot of hardware. Now having said that, if you work at a smaller company, you would. Like if I'm working at the library here in Wellington, the person that's doing that probably has to wear many hats. Has to work on computers, probably has to write any kind of program they may need. Networking does the whole shooting match. C++ programming. This is used by game development. It's used in maybe scientific, engineering type applications. That's where you saw a lot of it kind of pop up. Probably not so much in like financial programming and so forth. Some colleges want you to have C++, and so we offer it. It takes the C programming language and extends it. The idea was it would replace C, because it was going to take the C programming language and add in the object-oriented component. It handles garbage collection. Programs written in C, the C programming language itself, are notorious for being able to be hacked into. They don't have some of the security restraints. It doesn't handle memory correct, so forth. But it's still real popular. When you got a huge amount of your code base written in C, that doesn't just disappear overnight. C++ was kind of challenging. They didn't take the C and then just add on a few components. They redid a lot of it. So it's if you think, well, I know C, so I should be able to do half of that. No, not necessarily, because it's, like I said, changed. The ASP.NET. This is if you're wanting to take C# and create apps, create web applications. So if you want to create apps for a cell phone, for example, if you want to create apps for a web page, it's kind of you can almost think of it though, although it's a little bit more than that. But you can almost think of it as Microsoft's alternative to Java. Because Java is meant that you could create these web-based applications. Well, ASP.NET provides those web-based applications. So I could write a C# program and put it up on a web page and have people run it. They don't have to install anything on their computer and so forth. I say it's more than that because they kind of diverge at that point. Java has a lot of other purposes. It's supposed to be cross-platform, be able to run the same program on Linux with some maybe modification. MacBook, whatever kind of hardware you might have or operating system. ASP.NET, not so much so. You can't take that program and necessarily put it onto a Linux server. Now there is and I haven't done much with it, but I think it's called Mono, that allows you to do C#, and maybe you could take your ASP.NET through that and run it on Linux just fine. I think I even had a student one semester that installed Visual Studio on their Linux, not on like the Windows emulator, but actually on Linux. Of course, Java, you're in Java, so here's C programming. That's a big one. A lot of colleges want. So there's a lot of people signed up for that. Computer forensics. This gets into a little bit of the tools available for investigating crimes that's done on a computer. Some of the steganography, for example, people take inappropriate pictures and hide them inside other pictures. Talks about that and so forth. It's just a little bit of lab based on that. It's more typically definitions and so forth. 3D game development, that's if you're wanting to create a game like Call of Duty, if you're into that. It's a really good class to teach you C# skills, C# programming. Probably if you're not going to develop games, the only thing that really give you is that solid background in that area. Introduction to Digital Design. This is a class specifically if you're going to Wichita State. If you're going to any other college, probably won't transfer at all except for a general elective. It's looks at the lower level of design of electronics, specifically the R. No, I'm mixing that up with the next one, assembly language. But it just talks about how to design a circuit, like an AND gate, an OR gate, and so forth. So if you're interested in that, then that's what that class is. It's a requirement if going to Wichita State for computer science, and I think electrical engineering, computer engineering. I think just those three. That was one that they have a high failure rate at Wichita State. And they'd have people enter in at the junior level from Cali or from any of the community colleges. They went and they talked to everybody. They just didn't talk to Cali. They came to us, which is kind of unusual, and said, "Hey, we want you to offer these." So that wasn't my choice. Teaching circuits is not my favorite thing. But they came to us and said, "Hey, people got to have this done." They said people entering into junior level, it's a hard class. They oftentimes don't finish it. Their first semester may take them another semester or two to finish the class. And at that point, they're almost at a senior level, and that's a core class for all these other classes. And so they said it's really messing them up. A lot of them are having to go 5.5, 6 years in order to get their 4-year degree. So they came to us and said that that's one of them we need to be offering. So if you go into Wichita State and one of those 3 majors, at some point you want to make sure you get this handled. Oracle PLSQL. This teaches you the most popular database package, Oracle, and specifically the SQL side of it. Now, it'll start off by teaching you the SQL side, and then in addition to that, you can write, it integrates some of the programming constructs that you perhaps have seen in Java with SQL. So it provides a little bit more robust way to handle database events at night. For example, if you want to write something to do a backup, then PLSQL is maybe how you'd write that, how you'd set that up. Your straight SQL that you might just use in a query package like Access, where you drop the fields on there and so forth, does not have the programming constructs, like where you can loop and so forth. The introduction to Linux, Unix. This is definition, but it's also a lot of hands-on. Depending upon where you're going. First computer science course I took at Wichita State. I had never used, did I ever use Linux at that point? No, I hadn't used Linux. Later on I did. I used it quite a bit. But I was working at Coke then. I went and took class at Wichita State. They assumed that I knew Linux. And it's very command, although there are GUIs now. If I were to go to command prompt here at DOS, and I do a cd ... That goes back one directory. cd ... goes back another one. Go cd users, goes to users. Go to David. I press tab. It completes that. Make directory test it. I just made a directory. I changed that directory. I'm not sure if I remember this command. I think I just created a file. I do a dir, and the file is there. I have no clue how to list it. I've lost that knowledge in DOS. Cat is how you do it in Linux, but that's no, that's not supposed to be that way. But that's what I struggled with when I took that class at Wichita State. Linux is a lot of that, where it's command driven like that. There's not a nice GUI to do it. And I did not know all those commands. I had a horrible time in that first class because I was trying to learn Linux, and internet hadn't really taken off to a great extent at that point. And that was a hurtful class. Now you could probably, instead of taking the class, you could probably pick up a book, Linux for Dummies type of deal. Find some free site like that and get by with it. But if you want to be ahead of the game and you're going to a college that's Linux based in some way, Ubuntu, Fedora, a lot of the different ones, then you want to get that knowledge probably before, whether that's you're doing it yourself at home with Linux for Dummies. Like I went out to Udemy, if I'm saying that right, .com yesterday. I bought 8 classes. Not a Linux one, but I bought Node.js, I think was one of them, because I didn't buy it for a class to learn. I just thought, well, I'd like to learn more about it. Hopefully, I actually do something with that. Then some I bought for classes for spring, so I'd have that as an additional aid. Some of this, as the versions change, I need that extra help. But anyway, that's what that class is. You might say, well, I'll just click the buttons in Ubuntu or Fedora, the GUI. Yeah, it's nice, but not all of them have it. Wichita State, they didn't have that loaded on there. The reason why is they want you to know how to do this from the server side. Servers do not usually have a GUI. When you put a GUI on a Linux server, it opens up holes so people can hack in. If you don't have any of that GUI, there's less ports open, less holes that people can get into your system. So that's why if you go to a server, oftentimes they don't have that. Now, when I was very grateful, I worked with Linux quite a bit, Unix/Linux at IFR, and I was very happy when we put our Oracle server in because they had the GUI in there to do all that, and it made it so much easier. I didn't have to remember all the commands, all the regular expressions, all that in order to function within it. And the reason why we had that GUI on there is because our Oracle database server was not accessible from the outside world. And we assumed that our employees were honorable and wouldn't hack in. That may have been a false assumption, but I was very happy anyway to have the little GUI. Assembly language programming. This is where it deals with the ARM processor, and you program in assembly language. Again, this is something Wichita State told us to add in. This one's not as critical as the other one. The Introduction to Digital Design, that's the one you definitely should have. The assembly language program, they just said it'd be nice if they have it before they come to Wichita State. It's not going to set you back, so you have to go an extra 2 years, because assembly language is not a prereq for a lot of other classes. But they said that they recommend people have that done. Assembly language is also at some other colleges, so you might check a college on that, whether it's needed there. And then the Security Plus is a class that prepares you for the Security Plus CompTIA certification. The labs on there are done online, so you don't have to come in or anything like that. I talked a little bit too much about those classes, but is there any, I only got 2 minutes left, but is there any question on classes for next semester? Or I should mention the classes for next semester. If you're kind of the person who likes to hold off till the very end to sign up, go ahead and sign up. They don't charge you right away anyway, so it's free to go ahead and sign up now. Administration gets real nervous when it gets too close to the semester, and in some cases they want to cancel it if there's one student in there. I'm going to really push them this semester not to do that. But if there's a few students in there, they'll sometimes want to push it completely online where there isn't a Zoom session like this, and then have me teach some kind of math class during that time slot. They did that this semester. But anyway, so if you're waiting, go ahead and sign up for whatever ones you're interested in, and if you change your mind later on, you just drop them. So again, you don't have to pay them till the end anyway. Is there any questions on anything over the course, over the classes for next semester? It'll be assigned during the class session again, but I'm going to focus less on the definitions. I'm going to focus more on the programming in the class and actually putting additional YouTube videos out there that you can access. I think I've been focusing too much on the definitions in some of the classes, and I want to focus 100% on the programming part in those classes. And then also, that's going to give more time when I can offer online office hours at various times during the day. It'll be a Zoom thing. You can just hop on whenever, or you're always welcome to even come down here if you want to be in person. That was the idea behind it. Because not many people were signing on for the Zoom session, so we were thinking, well, if we have a little bit less there and have a little bit more opportunity for people to get that one-on-one help. Oh, definitely. Yeah. That seems to work out pretty good. Well, have a good break, and thanks everybody for your hard work during the class. I gotta go rush off to college algebra.